having like this is late, but.
All right, welcome to the November Citizen Involvement Committee meeting. It might be small in number, but big in heart, right? So we'll have Dennis take the roll, and just for everyone's information, the application that was turned in for a CIC rep for the Two Rivers neighborhood the mayor has denied. So we're still looking for a representative for Two Rivers. Dennis?
Okay. Can you
The reasoning for that would be,
Linda? Okay, Two Rivers, we just heard about. Gaffney Lane,
Present.
Park Place. Here. Hillendale. Tower Vista. McLaughlin.
Here.
Rivercrest. Caulfield. Here. Berkeley Hills is excused.
The reason is that the person that applied does not live or have an operating business, so he's not actually a member of the neighborhood.
I think he works there, but he doesn't own property or something.
He does business, I mean, he comes to Oregon City to do things, but he doesn't have an actual business in their neighborhood. Okay. Did we hear any more about Hillendale when Roy resigned? Do we have any updates there? Okay. We will work on getting that. With that, we will turn to Christina. She's agreed to do a presentation for us on understanding public notices and making effective public comments.
Thank you, Chair White. Kind of my goal tonight, I have a really short kind of 8-slide presentation to kind of go over how to read our land use notices and what they mean, and then how to make effective public comments. So I'm available for any questions. I printed out our kind of 2-page flyer that we have attached on our planning website, and also I made a link on the CIC website that just is good practical recommendations on how to make sure that your comments are best used. So if you want a link to that, I can send it to the CIC, and I can attach it at next month's liaison report.
Yes, please.
So in Oregon City, we have 4 levels of land use review, and it's this continuing era that goes from no discretion to highly discretionary. So a type 1 is what we consider an over-the-counter review, where they really are done over the counter. Usually you're filling out a worksheet, and it's really like a math problem. This is often done for single-family home review or very small changes to site plan design review, like you're amending your parking lot configuration, or you're adding a 200 square foot addition to your commercial building, or you're amending landscaping, or you're adding your refuse or recycling. Those are things you could, and there's you're changing and adding a doorway to your existing building. Those are the things that are usually done in conjunction with a building permit. So they're very clear and objective. The next is a type 2, which is usually a land division or a new construction of a commercial building or maybe an apartment complex. So those are noticed to the neighbors within 300 feet. Land use sign goes up, there's a public notice period, there's a specific public comment period. Staff renders that decision, which is appealable to the city commission. So there's a little bit more discretion, but our type 2 code is pretty clear and objective. So anytime there's any discretion, it's not a lot, but there is, but it's a little bit more than like an over-the-counter permit. So a type 3, this is
Can I ask a question on the type 2? So I just recently received a notice for it, and I had a comment. My question is, the application was put in, but we know of some major things that are going to be happening in the near future that will affect part of, like transportation and movement to that property. So when you're looking at it over the counter, are you just looking at as is today? Because like the traffic study they turned in is as of today, but we know within the next year it's going to be completely different.
So that's a good question. So a type 1 is so small that it's not going to trigger anything.
Yeah, it's a type 2.
Okay, so a type 1 is over the counter. Type 2 is a staff report with conditions of approval. And the traffic study does look at the applicant's proposed use and looks at the regional model and the model of existing proposed projects. This is the point. If you want to hold it to the end when I talk about effective comments, I can talk a little bit about how do you make effective comments related to transportation analysis? Because there's a way that I think public can provide background information that is helpful, but understanding kind of through a type 2 process, there's only so much it's built into the.
That's what my question is. What is the guideline? Is it just looking, if you're the staff person looking at it, is it just whatever's turned in and as of today, and you make the decision?
No. I'm going to answer the question, but then we'll continue on. But transportation studies look at what the applicant is proposing, and there's a transportation model that's put into the transportation modeling that we have that takes in transportation future projects, our transportation system plan, existing approved, either built or yet to be built projects, and a regional model of understanding what transportation is happening in the system. So I'm not a transportation engineer. That's about the level of my expertise, but we get back from our transportation engineer an understanding of what type of improvements are required by the applicant, what's their proportional level of improvements required based on what they're proposing.
But what I guess is the report, the transportation report that comes in with the application, is that what you have to look at, or do you have another transportation report that'll come in to go along with that when you're making your decision as staff?
Okay.
Is it just their traffic engineering report?
No, we have a transportation engineer that reviews the applicant's report against our city's modeling. And so if that may actually be, since as you can tell, I'm not a transportation engineer, that may be a good future presentation. We can bring John Replinger in, who's our transportation engineer. He's been a contract engineer for over 20 years for the city, and he reviews our transportation projects. And that may be a nice kind of 101 that the CIC can sponsor at a future meeting.
So whoever receives that at the counter that's going to make that decision will get a report from John in addition to the application stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you say over the counter.
I call it over the counter, but it's type 2.
Yeah.
Sorry, type 2.
So the hard part about the type 2, well, not the hard part, but with a type 2, it looks at the condition of the transportation system at the day of opening. And as Christina walks through this, when you get into type 3s and type 4s, when you're looking at zone changes or comp plan amendments, the horizon that we look at is much longer. So there's little nuances. All traffic reports and what we look at aren't identical. Right.
So I'm just talking about type 2.
Yep. So
if one comes in and I know that there's going to be changes on Malala Avenue coming into the streetscape, but it's not, none of that is in their engineer's report. So is whoever is making this staff decision going to take into account this streetscape project and all the changes that are coming in the next 2 years, or is it going to just look at what it looks like right now?
I'll give you a good answer. If it's an adopted plan, we'll look at what the adopted plan tells us. So something
well,
like
I don't know. Is the streetscape still at 90? The 90% just came in. Is it an adopted plan then?
I mean, for that specific question, we can take a look, but we also have a fallback of the transportation system plan, provides direction, maybe not to the level of detail that the Malala Avenue plan does, but we will take a look at all of our existing plans.
Because I think that's a big frustration that citizens have, including myself, is knowing something's coming in and something's going to change and something gets approved. Well, we had to approve it, but if you know, then that seems to me that should be taken into account.
Apparently my mic is not on.
Oh.
Can we hold that for a moment? Because I do want to make sure we talk.
Since we're at type 2.
I know, and everyone's talking about transportation, and your comments really bring in, maybe we do need to come in and have a transportation 101, because a lot of people's comments are related to transportation. I can talk kind of bigger picture and how to get involved and kind of how your comments are effective in different pieces. And what Tony was saying, as we get to type 3, that's a conditional use. So like maybe a church is coming in, or a school, or in addition to a school, or in addition to a church, that may take a conditional use. So unlike, at type 2, it goes to a planning commission, it goes to a public hearing. There's more discretion built into conditional use because we can look at impact and the quality of the impact on the neighborhood, and we could add conditions on to the application based on their impact. And so that's why we go to a hearing, because there's more discretion. And type 4 are what goes to the Planning Commission and City Commission. So that would be like a zone change. So that takes some of the greatest discretion. That's looking at our comprehensive plan, our vision for the community, if a zone change is kind of fits within that vision, and should the highest possible purview should be our elected officials, the city commission, just to see if what's proposing aligns with the city vision. And that goes, zone changes go in front of the planning commission, and they make a recommendation to the city commission, or maybe a legislative change, which we're doing on the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan code implementation. So it's a type 4 process. It's going to this planning commission. They'll vote on approval of recommended code changes, and that'll go to the city commission. And the city commission makes the final decision on that. So I like to think about it, it's a continuum of discretion. So the best way to answer the question, what are the development projects in the city? The first one is to look at our development project page, and I realize the photo down here is a little old because we now have a new link at the bottom of the main city page that says development projects. And you can also get it from the planning page, but now it's available at the bottom of the main page. You click on it and you see the map up top, and it will list every land use notice project, so anything from type 2 and above that has been in the city each year. And it'll identify the address and location, so you can scroll till you find the project. We also have what neighborhood association I think it's identified, so sometimes you can query by neighborhood. So you can click on that, like let's say you have you want to know about this project right here. If you click on it, you'll be brought to the next project page, which is here. So each land use application has a project page where we upload the applicant's submittal and the public notice and the vicinity map and any additional information. This is not the full record. That's available at the planning offices if you want to get additional information that comes in over the process. This is kind of the first package of information. So this page tells you if there's a hearing date, it'll tell you when the hearing date is. If it is a public comment staff decision, it'll say the deadline for comment. So depending on what the application is, it'll give that information. It'll tell you the neighborhood, and it'll tell you who the planner is. So in this one was a 5-lot subdivision, and Pete Walter was the planner. So here's his contact information. This will give you kind of the basic information and a map of the location. Land use applications also have a notice. These are always mailed to property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. And these have a lot more information. We also legally have to put some information what the criteria is and the process for commenting and some other legalese, as well as the file numbers and the applicant's information. If you are type 2 and above, you also have a sign on your property. And depending on how big your property is, you might have more than one sign. So if you have multiple frontages or you have a really long frontage, you may have multiple signs. We generally have a map as well as the land use sign. The goal is not for you to be able to read this sign from your car in your street. So you'll never build as big enough of a sign to do that. The goal is, if you're really interested, park, walk, get the information, get back in your car.
Could you go back to the
Sure.
previous slide? The notice that shows the neighborhood association is Hazel Grove Wesleyan Farms. We know that they're not active anymore. So where does the notification go?
Right. So, I mean, this was a sample page from a
Yeah, I
previous,
realize that, but it just brought my question
So we
up.
still have, you're still categorized by neighborhood association because that's a GIS function. We send the notice to all, to any neighborhood association contact we have for that neighborhood association. So if we don't have any, we still would send it to our chair of the CIC.
And right now on the city page, and the planning department knows that any that came in to an inactive neighborhood have to come to the CIC. So they would have to do a presentation
but-
here or hold one
Yeah.
of their own.
But you're still going to be identified by your neighborhood because it's a function of our mapping program. That's not going to change.
Okay.
So once again, you're never going to be able to read it from your car, park
You
your
could go
car.
click on the map then. You could go back to.
Yeah, but honestly, the best thing to do is go look at it and write down the file number and then go back to your computer and look it up. Or just go back to your computer and find it. We also email this notice to lots of people. We have, I don't know, probably 60 people on our email notice list. And so those are city and county departments, local state agencies, neighborhood associations, the CSE chair. We are always trying to update our neighborhood association contact list. So if for some reason you're noticing nobody in your neighborhood association is getting these emails, let planning know and we'll amend it. What?
How would you know?
Well, I know. But if you're hearing that you're not getting it, let us know. I'm always trying to work with our planning department to keep them up, but let me know. Let's see. So that is a really way. We also send it to CPOs as well. So like the
CPO being
the county planning organization. I was just going to say that.
Alphabet
So
soup.
people, groups like the Hamlet of Beaver Creek are on our mailing list. So unfortunately, they get everything, but they can, query the emails that matter to them. You can also get access to all of the exhibits related to an application that are type 3 and above on a planning commission or city commission agenda. So you'll see on the left, all those exhibits are hyperlinked as PDFs. This is when a staff report comes to the planning commission or city commission with staff recommendation. These are listed a week before the meeting and uploaded. You can get access to them via the meetings and agendas tab that you probably have all been on. But just to remind, if neighbors are interested, they want to know, what are the conditions? What does planning recommend? What's going on with this project? And that the agenda's already gone out. You can tell them to look at the agenda. For type 3 and above projects that go to hearings, the public records ends at the time that the either planning commission closes the record and makes a decision, or the city commission closes the record and makes their decision. And so with a hearing, you can remind people, even though the agenda's up and there's a staff report, public comment is being accepted all the way through into the meeting. So if people want to send an email to the identified staff at any time they can, and staff will walk on those comments. If they want to attend the meeting, they can. They can attend the meeting and hand in their handwritten comments. All those are an option. If you want your comments to be part of the staff report, you usually look at the notice and it tells you the deadline for get your comments into the staff report. Now, if it's a type 2, which is a staff level decision, there is a closing period of public comment and the record is closed. So if you turn your public comment in 2 days late, we can't accept it because the record is closed, just for type 2 decisions. Those are staff level decisions. So now you know about a project, you found it, you've looked at the applicant's application, and you have thoughts. How best do you present your thoughts to both staff and the planning commission, city commission? So some comment about letters, always includes your name and address and phone number and email. Now, if you don't want to include your email because it will be, added as a PDF, you don't have to. So anything you do turn in as a public comment will be uploaded into our public comment system and, is available for people to look at. So remember, if you want your email added, to choose that. State your interest in the case and who you represent. So if you're speaking for a neighbor association or a group, say that. If you're speaking for yourself, say that. And what do you want, as always, a good executive summary. What do you want out of the city planning commission or city commission? Do you want them to support it, not support it, but add this condition, or support it, but you're really concerned about this thing? Say it up top in a letter. Don't bury the lead. And then most specifically, cite specific things. What are the specific things about the application that you feel is not being met? So what doesn't help, sometimes I get public comments that just say, I don't like development, I don't want this built. I can't do anything with that comment. So I add it to the file, and my staff's response is, see comment added to file. So I can't do much with that on a staff level to respond. But if someone comes in and says, I'm really concerned about the sight distance at this intersection, I drive my car and I can't see, and I'm really worried that XYZ will happen and they need to, I think the subdivision needs to fix the site distance as part of their application. You know, you've given lots of facts in that letter, and that's helpful. So as staff, I have to say, you know, this neighbor wrote these things. I then talked to the engineering department and they cite the standard or not, or maybe a condition is added to address this issue. So the more specific you are in the comments, the more we can look at it and decide either that's applicable, and yes, that could be a condition, or it's applicable, maybe applicant has to provide more information, or it's just not applicable in this manner, but here's the code of why it's not applicable. So I like, the bottom one I really like is provide information if you can that reveals gaps or errors in staff's findings and conclusions or introduces new information. Is there something that's not being introduced, has not been part of the application submittal so far that you think is relevant information for the approval criteria? And always, you know, Chicken Little comments don't do a lot. So, you know, we all have passions, but once again, I can't do a lot with I hate this development. So when you do public testimony, as always, study the application so you know your facts. And purely emotional arguments don't carry much weight, but a little bit of emotion with facts actually does carry some weight. You know, if you can come in with some passion but have some facts behind it, that's really helpful for the Planning and City Commission. Focus on 2 or 3 big thoughts or arguments. A list of 10 things you usually lose people. So what are the big things you're trying to get out of your public comment? Try to understand our comprehensive plan, especially as you get into these type 3 and type 4 hearings when we're really looking back to our comprehensive plan policies. Maybe maybe staff cited a comprehensive plan policy and you have a different take on that. Talk about it. And as always, address the criteria for that decision that's applicable for that criteria, because once again, we can't, Planning Commission and City Commission can't add a condition if they can't link it to a legal criteria.
Christina?
Yeah.
Could you kind of expand on that criteria thing?
Yeah, so I'm actually...
Because I think there's an area on the applications where the criteria are listed.
You're right there. So if you look on this... if you look at this, you'll see criteria, and all of the criteria, which is usually the underlined zone, a bunch of public works chapters like streets and trees, and any overlay zones like natural resource overlay or geologic hazards or flood, as well as what do you do in site plan design review, subdivision. So those are the kind of take a look at the applicable chapters. And then just if you're ever questioning about process, chapter 1750 is our process chapter, and that tells you how do we do appeals, how do neighborhood associations get free appeals, you know, what's the hearing process like, who gets noticed, how do you get noticed? That's all in 1750. That's our process chapter, and that's applicable for all land use reviews. So that is the code section, and the staff report really is taking all of those code sections, looking at the code, looking what the applicant is proposing, and seeing has the applicant met that criteria, and if not, does a condition of approval need to be added? A lot of times in subdivisions, they're pretty standard conditions of approval because you're not at that level of design detail. So they put a condition in that says, you know, the applicant appears to meet this, but prior to final plat, the applicant must show X, Y, Z. So a fair amount of subdivision conditions of approval are really engineering standards related. I don't have a slide up here, but what we're doing with our planning staff memos, staff reports, is you'll see a DS or a P in parentheses after each condition of approval, and they'll tell you which department is associated with that. So if you see a DS, that's a development services, so that's our engineering group's condition. If you see a P, that's a planning department recommended condition. So it can help you understand who came up with that condition and which department would the applicant be working with. Or if you have a question, who should you call up, engineering or planning related to that? So those are the code criteria, and a lot of them are pretty clear and objective, but when you get to conditional use and zone change, there's a lot of with conditional use, is it compatible? Is the application compatible? If a variance application is the applicant showed a hardship, those are a lot more discretionary than are the windows 60% transparency measured linearly? Well, you can get your, your ruler out for that. That's a little bit easier. So finally, for kind of those basic 6 rules of verbal testimony: be courteous, be brief, focus on primary issues, supply meaningful facts, respect others, and avoid repeating prior testimony. So if there's 10 of you all coming up because you do not want to support an application, listen to everybody ahead of you, mark off what they also said, and then maybe add something to the conversation. So you can say, I support everything the following speaker said, and now I want to add this to it. Because with the Planning Commission, it's, if you've all been up here when you listen to people, if you have 10 people saying the same thing, it kind of loses its momentum. Whereas if people say the thing in different ways or in different emphasis, I think it's more helpful to follow the train of public comment. So to respond back to Chair Hill's comment about transportation, it may be good for this group to learn a little bit more about how, especially more clear and objective transportation reviews are done, because I think that is sometimes what people get really confused about, how their comments are integrated into an approval for a type 2. We have a very strong legal burden as cities to make sure that we put any conditions that are proportional and have a nexus to a development application. So for example, if a 30 or 15 lot subdivision came in and we can't make them fix an intersection 1,000 feet away, if that's not proportional to their 15 lots. So it's that combination of bringing system development fees in and we package together projects that are proportional, or, what is that nexus? How many cars of their development are going through and impacting it? So we're always talking to our attorneys, we're always looking at that nexus versus proportionality. And that's when we get to these decisions, what we legally can approve, require, especially off-site improvements. Usually you can always get, a commercial or a subdivision application to provide street improvements on their frontage. But it's the off-site improvements that get a little more technical about what we can and cannot require done outside of just collecting system development fees.
I think that's a great idea, because one of the things that I remember specifically jumping out is the number of trips. And if you're adding in 24 units and you say there's 10 trips in the morning and 14 in the afternoon, that doesn't compute with when the engineers come to our neighborhood associations and talk about 2 trips per unit or something, and it's like, well, then how did you just get less? So those kinds of things would be good to know.
Average daily trips versus PM peak trips and all those kind of pieces of how, we look at engineering transportation studies and how that's translated in a legal way. Yeah.
That AM and PM peak is the one that we focus on. Because you could drive down 213 right now and there's more capacity than we'll use in the next 50 years, right? So if you were proposing something that their business operations were overnight, we're going to bring our trucks in and get them in and out of the docking facility between 9 p.m. and 4 a.m., right? The AM and PM trips then obviously aren't being impacted, and that's where we struggle, right? I mean, that's where you get the failures at the intersections. And so that's where you get into, okay, you assume 2 trips per single family house, 2.5 trips per single family house, but then there's, how many trips are going to actually be leaving between the AM peak hour?
Yeah, and how do you decide that?
Where are they going to go? Right, which route are they going to take?
Trip distribution.
So I think that's where John would be very helpful in some of the methodology that's utilized in the trip distribution and calculation to explain why those numbers are different depending on what you're looking at for the time of day of travel relative to the time of use, or
And one was, how often are those updated? Where do they come from? Are those state mandated, federal mandated? Are they his opinion? You know, those, I think that will all help us, help citizens. Because if we don't understand or agree with what they're saying, how are we supposed to help?
Yeah, I can talk to John. We can take a look at the December, January meeting and what makes sense.
Yeah, I think December we've got Public Works to have 2 presentations, so first part of the year would be better.
Yeah,
I have a question.
sure.
A question came up at our steering committee meeting regarding what does the neighborhood association do? What are the guidelines for what we do with land use applications?
Well,
Where do we find that information?
when you can provide public comment. You are, we require neighborhood association meetings if you meet certain thresholds. So a new commercial building, a new subdivision, so that's probably not going to be applicable for McLaughlin, but new commercial buildings, new residential buildings that are multifamily require a neighborhood meeting.
And Christina, what does that mean?
So
What does neighborhood meeting mean?
so one of the completeness criteria for a land use application, and if you look in that chapter 1750, our procedures chapter, it has a list of things that require basically a pre-meeting with a city recognized neighborhood association.
Now, they've come to our steering committee rather than the
And
general
that's
meeting.
up to your neighborhood association bylaws.
But
you
how
do
does that meet the criteria? If you have a steering committee meeting at a restaurant and you have 3 people there, how does that, and all those 3 people live on the same street, how does that meet goal 1? You are not getting the neighborhood's input. So if that's what they turn in, if that's all you're requiring, we need to fix that.
Well, that's a decision of the neighborhood association.
No, I'm saying we need to fix it from the level of what's accepted as a neighborhood meeting. I think that needs to be more, not each neighborhood gets to decide, because we obviously have neighborhoods that think if they have a meeting and 3 people that live on the same street come, it's not noticed to the public because it's a steering committee meeting, those aren't always noticed. And so I think that when on the application where it says you have to have a neighborhood, I think wherever that's being pulled from, if that's in code, I think that needs to be clarified what counts as a neighborhood meeting. Otherwise, I can invite John over to my house and say, okay, John, I call Phil and Bob and say, come on over.
But I think that's getting back to kind of McLaughlin has set up a land use steering committee that addresses land use. I'm not debating whether that's the right way to do it or not, but just realize that's
do they
to
need
get
to
an
do?
application deemed complete. Then we actually do the public noticing once it's complete, which includes the 300-foot mailing, posting of the property. So it's a 2-step process. One was trying to, make folks aware in the neighborhood association that an application's coming. And then there's a second notice when the actual application is deemed complete. All the information is ready. And then you go through the public noticing process.
And I
So I think
understand what you're
that'd be a
saying,
discussion for
but
the
when you
CIC
have
to
3
tell
people,
neighborhood
I don't think
associations how to
that's
do their
meeting the-
bylaws.
I don't think that's meeting the need. I don't think that letting each neighborhood, I mean, I agree there has to be discretion on how neighborhoods handle, but I don't think you should leave it up to each neighborhood to just say, okay, this is how we did it. We had, John came to my house and I invited 2 of the neighbors and we called it a steering committee meeting, therefore it's legal. Here's our minutes. I mean, I think that doesn't meet the definition.
Well, we had a pediatric clinic they're going there, Malala 213. And they came to the neighborhood meeting and he step by step explained what he was trying to do, how the land came about, who was involved. So if they come in a group like that, at least we understood what was happening. But you said a couple of people meeting is not the way
Yeah.
to
Our steering
handle
committee has about
a
7
big
people
change
at
in your
least.
neighborhood.
Yeah, like Gaffney Lane used to have a land use thing. All of the notices went to the land use. I was the chair for a year before I even knew he was getting things and he was making the decision himself. So, I just think that it's something we could help. It's a goal that I think we need to address. And I don't know if it's the CIC that should address it, if it's the city commission that addresses it, is it the plan? I mean, would we get a ball rolling?
Well, it'd probably be a good conversation for the CIC because I know each neighborhood does it a little differently. Some bring those meetings to the full neighborhood association meeting, and some have set up steering or subcommittees that have been adopted by the board of that neighborhood association to handle those. So I think we'd probably be hearing the pros and
And our
cons of
question
both
was,
methods.
how do they handle them?
Yeah.
Are there guidelines somewhere?
No, there aren't.
So that was
Here.
why there was a
Linda?
I think it's up to every neighborhood how they're going to handle this. And some of the neighborhoods are much smaller or have more people that are active than others. Some of the neighborhood associations, I think, are so small, they don't have enough, or so new that they're not getting the people there to handle all these problems. But I think every neighborhood should have its own way of doing this. Kenema has a land use liaison who comes to these meetings, attends all the meetings, and gives us a report at all of our meetings, so we know what's coming up and what's done. It's an excellent report that he provides.
So if you receive a land use, if somebody wants to build.
Something in Kenema, they come to our neighborhood meeting.
So see, they're coming to the meeting. And that's what I mean. I think there needs to be a
And then the whole neighborhood hears what we do, and then we usually take a vote. Do we support this person or do we not? And then that person has the meeting minutes he can take. He has our sign-in sheets. We have sign-in sheets. How many people were there? Were these all builders or were they neighborhood people? And then we have a letter of support or not a letter of support that we can send, and they get that to go with their package that comes
Well,
in.
and I agree with you, that's how we do it, but that's letting the most neighborhood know, but not all neighborhoods are doing that. So I think there should be a minimum threshold. That I have a hard time if you have 3 people that are your steering committee and you allow the.
7.
I know, you do, but some neighborhoods don't, and they're counting that as their meeting. I just think there needs to be a minimum threshold of notification. I mean, if only 3 people show up, only 3 people show up, but somehow it feels like there should be a threshold that has to be met.
You know, then I had a comment after Stephen.
Steve?
So one of the things about that presentation, the pre-application presentation, they're just giving information. It's not a yay or nay from the neighborhood. They're just being presented. The neighborhood will now have an opportunity to make comment following that presentation. So there doesn't need to be any decision made at that point in time.
Well, not a decision, but when they come, they're at the input level.
Yeah,
So
they're still at the beginning.
that's what's wonderful, because that's the time you have the opportunity to say, ooh, have you thought of this? And they think, oh, we haven't, and we've seen that happen, and then they change. And it's nice because you don't have to go through this formal come into the hearing and have your information put in.
Yeah.
And so that's what's nice, but that's why I'm saying, if only 2 people are there.
Right. So
people.
the other thing that sort of came up earlier is we now have inactive neighborhoods. And those,
They have to present them here or have.
are they going to be presented to the CIC?
They have to, the CIC is in the place of the neighborhood. Like if Hazel Grove, if something was coming in,
Right.
they would have to notice.
So there's-
and they could either come here or they could choose to hold a meeting in the, with our CIC
Yeah.
approval in the Hazel Grove area.
So that was
But it
actually-
all has to be approved by the CIC.
That was one thing I was going to mention. The reason why, one of the cases of why there's sometimes steering committees is because some of these neighborhood associations only meet every 3 months. And by code, an applicant is allowed to hold a separate meeting, a notice to 300 feet of the properties of the subject site at either a city venue or there's, basically easily accessible venue. For a lot of neighborhoods, if they didn't have a steering committee, then a lot of the applications will be done that way, the secondary way, because scheduling is quite hard and nothing ever falls into a neighborhood meeting. So having this, if a neighborhood association wants a steering committee meeting, it's a way for them to have that without having a separately noticed meeting. But we have in our processes both options: either meet with the neighborhood association and turn in your, sign-in sheet in minutes, or you hold a separate meeting and you follow the following processes. And so we have I'd say 80% of it's the neighbor association meeting and 20% is a separate one.
Right, but if you go in and look, which I frequently do, when the stuff comes through and I look and I see what the meeting was, there's times where I question that it's the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law, and it seems like there should be at least a minimum threshold. If there were 8 people there and 5 of them were the developers and 3, like I say, and they lived on the same street, I don't think we're meeting the goal of the whole land use process. And so I don't have a problem with steering committee meetings. I just question, are they, like when Park Place has a steering committee and they come, they still notice everybody. And people come, like they'll have 90 people show up at their steering committee meeting because they found out it's a land use night.
It's a land use.
And so if you have a steering committee meeting and you limit it and you don't let your neighbors know that this is the opportunity where the builders are coming in, you miss something. And I think that it's not, like you said, it's not necessarily a decision time, but that's the time where they're open to hearing you and you're open to discussion, and it's a great opportunity. And so if you just throw it off to a tiny group, and if that's how your neighbor decide, but again, if there was a minimum threshold, I just think it would be hopeful so that people feel like they were heard in this. I think that was the whole reason that they did the neighborhood, was it was less formal. It's ahead of the game, so you're hoping to thwart some of the major contention. I mean, sometimes you're going to have it in big developments, but especially the little ones. If they come to the neighborhood, by the time they turn in their application, they don't have a lot of flack because it's already been taken care of. Bob?
Isn't there a rule that once the neighborhood has been notified of a request for a meeting, that you only have 30 days to schedule that? So that kind of restricts also, because like you said in Park Place, we get notification out. So if it's, we get a whole bunch of people if it's a land use, but and we have either a general meeting or a steering committee meeting every month. But if you don't get that notification out, then you'd be in a situation where Amy is talking about, and that 30-day restriction is really quite restrictive. And that if the neighborhood can't meet that 30-day restriction, then it allows the developer to organize their own meeting like you.
Yeah, and I found they don't usually want to do that.
No, usually they'll
Probably
wait.
not. No,
They'd
probably
love
not.
to, they'll either wait or they'll say, what can we do to help? It's very, very rarely, I think, do they want to hold their own I mean, that's not, but yeah, that's okay.
I have one question. So, it seems like a good tool. I mean, the whole device, and I'm kind of curious, and I feel bad that I haven't checked this out. Is there a tab there now on the webpage for the development link? So it would be advantageous for people concerned in their neighborhood about what the projects are going on. So if it's going to list every land use project, I mean, they're capable of being informed
They just
you
need to
see
know
right
that's what
here.
it means.
in advance
Yeah.
of like a meeting coming up, or
So
I
this is
think that's a
development
good thing. I
projects.
think it would help the neighborhoods.
And then we are testing the ability to sign up to get notices within your neighborhood when a land use notice comes out. And I can put that in a future email. I was wary because I was like, there's 1 or 2 things that need to be noodled through to make sure we're right, because I don't want to send out a bad link. But I think we are about in a place where you can sign up and say, send me every land use notice that is identified in the Gaffney Lane neighborhood.
Oh, that one, yeah, that's great.
And then the moment that, let's say, pretend this is in Gaffney Lane. Oh, there we go. Oh, look at that. And that's a capital improvement project. But like this one, pretend this was a Gaffney Lane. The moment it gets uploaded and published, it gets sent out. I think on a weekly basis, there's anything new gets sent out to.
So on a weekly basis, we update.
Yeah. So,
And I get that right now, it's really kind of
yeah,
nice.
and we've been testing it out, and I think we're
like
ready
it.
to send it forward. But we had some technical things we needed to work through before we wanted to blast it out.
So as Linda was saying, we've been very fortunate. We had, a gentleman in our neighborhood who would take this task on himself, discover what projects were going on, and then give us a report.
Right, and he's, your neighborhood contacts for land use are in our notice, or that big email notice, so they do get that as well.
So, I mean, this is a nice enhancement.
I have one more question. Just one more.
Okay.
Conditions of approval. I found out, I guess it's been a couple of years ago now, that in a issue that, a development, there was several conditions of approval, and then after everything was said and done, and actually the development was almost completed, I found out that one of the conditions of approval had been eliminated. And it actually was a safety issue. But nobody was notified in the neighborhood of the elimination of the condition of approval. And I was wondering if something had been done to prevent that from happening in the first place, or some mechanism to notify the people of interest that that had happened.
I don't know the particular application you're speaking of. We don't need to go into particulars, but.
Well, I can if you wish, but.
It doesn't, each condition of approval, it matters how things are worded. Was this an engineering condition of approval? Was it related to like a construction?
It referred to some sidewalk lighting between the neighborhood and school grounds, which the lighting was a condition of approval. And then after everything was said and done, the builder went back and said, we can't do this, and the condition of approval was eliminated.
I don't know about that particular one. Generally, the conditional approvals are the condition of approval, though there are some situations where new information comes to light, and I don't know if there's a technical issue, but for the most part, your condition of approval is your condition of approval. So that's why I need to get to look at the actual wording, and maybe it was written in a way that further design could finalize something.
No, what it boiled, my concern is not the actual condition of approval itself, but the process of the elimination of the condition of approval without notification to the neighborhood association who would have been concerned about that particular issue.
Yeah, it seems like there should be a system in place that if a condition's removed, any interested party should have been notified.
Right, and so that's why I think the condition generally is removing is not that's an actual process. So that's why I'd want to look at the specific wording to see if it was like through the design process, it was revised.
It wasn't revised, it was just eliminated.
Can I do some research, Bob? I need to know more about it.
John Lewis has been working on that for me for almost 2 years now. So you can.
I'll talk to John and I'll give you a little update, maybe even by email, just about that particular one. But for the most part, conditions of approval are conditions of approval, though. Read some of them, because once again, because it says transition from a proposed, especially engineering related, or proposed design, and the condition of approval often allows a further refinement, but, or like if feasible or if practicable, do this if you can. Or that's our first priority to do it X way. So it really depends on how something's written. So I'd have to look at.
Well, I don't want you to go into a whole bunch of research on this because.
Again, he's not the specific one.
Because the reason why I'm saying is we don't.
It was what happened is they found out that PGE wouldn't allow that lighting.
Oh.
So, John is trying to figure out another way to provide lighting for that. But I don't want you to go a whole bunch of trouble and try to research something that's already been researched.
So
Again, my issue is questioning the process of eliminating that. Shouldn't the neighborhood or people of interest been notified of the elimination?
So if it says if feasible and the contractor says not feasible and they say, okay, no one's notified. Is that what you're?
Well, you're notified with the final conditions of approval. What I'm trying to didn't, and the reason my squirrel cage is running around in circles right now, because I'm trying to come up with an answer of, we don't have a process to provide, because when we review conditions of approval, sometimes it's over a 2-year period, and, you know, you're like, okay, condition 35, 36, and 37 were met this week. You still have these, and so it's this long process that we kind of work with an applicant, and they propose, and we check off one, so we don't have anything simple to say when something, you know, we're usually working up to a plat or a condition of, certificate of occupancy to find out if we've gotten all the conditions met. So when you say something's removed, that's why I will thinking of, because that's a separate process. So I'd have to talk to John about that particular question.
All right, is there anything else did we interrupt? I'm sorry, Denise, I interrupted about the whole land use.
Yep, no, my
Thing
question
was
was not answered, so.
It wasn't?
No.
Yeah.
No, the question was, are there guidelines for what the people that are going to be deciding, providing a yay or a nay on a land use
No,
application?
because you are separate entities as a city, and all we require for completeness is that you hold the meeting. So it's your
And
bylaws
then we
that
get
tell
to
you what
decide
you
if we're
need to
going to
do.
support it or not.
Yeah, and actually, our completeness doesn't even require a comment of yay or nay. Their completeness is that you had the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you had the meeting per your bylaws.
90% of the time, our neighborhood won't say yay or nay.
Yeah, it's just a completeness item for us.
Thanks.
Okay,
All right.
Are we done? Okay.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Public comments. I know we have one. Bob LaSalle.
My public comments are actually for Jerry Herman, he couldn't be here tonight. He asked me to give these announcements for him. And he, of course, we know hasn't been allowed to be on the CIC for good reason, but he still intends to take part in the meetings as a observer whenever he possibly can. But he asked me to, again, announce this Two Rivers Neighborhood Association kind of a tour that they have on the one side of this brochure 1 week prior to Thanksgiving, and I think he told me he did not have the registration phone number on the previous flyer that he sent out or provided to you all the last meeting, and so it looked like it might be kind of interesting. Meet at the elevator at 10 o'clock on November 23rd. And then on the backside, there's a Cove Community Projects tour on Saturday, November 30th. Again, a 2-hour thing to reestablish trails, the history of the Cove, invasive cleanup, native trees and shrubs saved by youth, future Cove and community improvement. So it might be a pretty informative kind of tour to go, and he's given a nice little map. So if you'd like to sign up for that or register on that, again, the phone number is provided there. He does a pretty good job on these tours. He gives a lot of good information, but sometimes information that's a little too detailed, a little more than what you really want to know about, but it's all right there for you.
I think there's a typo.
Oh,
At-risk you will be employed.
what's that?
What?
I think it's supposed to be at-risk youth. At-risk you.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Add a TH.
Yeah.
So that's all I had for Jerry.
Okay.
But he's very interested in trying to keep us up on Two Rivers, even though he can't be an official member.
That's great. All right, staff liaison update?
Yeah, I have 3 pretty quick updates. As you all know, CIC is being reappointed in January, so all your appointments end. So right now, I have McLaughlin, Caulfield, Park Place, and Gaffney Lane have turned in their names for the CIC as of last week by Katie Riggs. So if you did it this week, let us know. But if you have yet to submit your names, please do it ASAP to Katie. She will be putting everything together, and the reappointment will happen either the end of the year or very beginning of the new year. So,
Well, it needs to be before the new year, because at our January CIC meeting, we have to put in a new chair because my term limits are up. So we need to have members who are approved so we can have a meeting.
okay, I'll let Katie know. Get your names in if you're not on that list.
Kanema. Do you have a meeting coming up?
We do have this
We have a
one.
meeting coming up.
Yeah, that's the problem. We have to wait for meetings, and we get that.
That's what I told Katie. Y'all could meet the same timeline as everyone else. I linked again to postcards. There's a page. So if any of your neighbor association is changing who's doing the postcards, I have a link to the timeline of when to turn that in. And then the PowerPoint presentations from last month are attached to this agenda. So if somebody's interested in the code updates or the water capital improvement project, we have those PowerPoints.
All right. So roundtable, one thing I would like to challenge all of that are here, and then I would like to send out to the others that are here. Starting with the roundtables, I like to challenge people to bring a concern from their neighborhood or a positive something that's happened in the neighborhood. So it's more than just what we did at our meeting, but if there's some big concern you guys are working on, or the bronze to boot, something that your neighborhood's done, I'd like to try to, something that we can get everybody excited about or inform people about, in addition to just had a meeting, here's what we had, or here's who's coming. So there's a challenge. Start with you, Linda. That's the December meeting.
Oh, okay.
You don't have to do that today. Sorry, let me clarify that.
Let her finish first.
I had just went to the
I gave her an idea, right?
the Two Rivers meeting I attended, and it was small but very mighty. They had a nice talk. Their concerns were the homeless camps that they have. There's quite a few down there and around, and they were concerned about that. And they also had great talks about Bob Lascelles' last CIC meeting. He had asked something for the to go to the mayor.
And that will be going Wednesday.
Yes, and that did, okay, because they were talking about that. So that's what that Two Rivers was talking about. Their meeting, and I'll let Dennis talk about Kanema. I was just there.
Because me now.
Okay, John?
We just had a meeting of some of the heads of our group. Our chairman is not going to keep the position next year, so we meet 2 days before Thanksgiving, so hopefully we can get that problem solved. Yeah, that's the biggest thing we have, because the vice chair doesn't have time for it, so we'll see what's happening there. We went over what we wanted to have for speakers coming up in the next few meetings, just trying to get things put together for next year. So at least we go into the new year with our feet on the ground, especially with changes happening, things like that. Did you say Caulfield put in for the new CIC?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
I didn't know that. Okay.
Well, you and your chair, but if he's not going to be the chair, then that might change.
Okay.
Or if he still wanted to be, I don't know what your bylaws say.
Yeah. We'll find out, I guess. We have some meetings coming up. So 2 days for Thanksgiving, we'll get our elections and everything put together and find out where we sit. That's the biggest thing we have going on right now. Especially the change at the top. That always helps.
Mm-hmm. All right, Bob?
Park Place, we are concerned, we'd like to get back up from the CIC, is Holcomb Boulevard crosswalks or lack thereof. Steve and I went on a tour of the whole city and counted how many crosswalks, how many signals, how many stop signs were in several streets, roads, avenues throughout the city comparable to Holcomb Boulevard in distance. And Holcomb Boulevard is crosswalk deprived. And we'd like to try to get the transportation system plan bumped up for the priority of those. We'd like to have the support of the CIC if we can get that.
Are
So
you
that-
going to be taking that to the TAC, the Transportation Advisory
We already
Committee?
have.
Already did that.
Oh, okay. Because if you want to come with something that you'd like to propose for the CIC that we could vote on, that would be.
I'll do that, because your concern just brought that thought up to me that would be.
Because just like Christina said, when you bring something to this commission and it's helpful to have what you want, so, yeah, that way.
We discussed, last Monday, we had our general meeting, and we discussed the Park Place cleanup and the Park Place Park, and we cleaned up a bunch of blackberries and a whole bunch of stuff, and there was a little blurb in the Oregon City News, I think, about that. Our police officer gave a very good presentation this time, a very informative handout given to us. There was quite a lot of discussion about the Park Place concept plan and future development of that area. And we found out that apparently the 92 acres that has just been annexed, the development is very, very low on the developer's list of projects that they have going, but that remains to be seen. Land use issues, of course, are always primary in the Park Place because we have so many things going on. We have so much property available up there. Let's see, and then there's also, we're gonna have to follow up on this. There's a new 3 or 4 home subdivision going on just off of Holcomb Boulevard on Godon Way, and the one existing home is adjacent to Holcomb Boulevard, and they do not have sidewalks on Holcomb Boulevard for that property. And the backside of his property, he's the developer, will be where the 3 or 4 new homes are being built. And so he's kind of being resistant to putting his share of the sidewalk on Holcomb Boulevard. So we're going to have to follow up with our planner, who is Pete, and make sure that the neighborhood can do as much as possible to have one more little section of Holcomb Boulevard, a little piece at a time, with sidewalks. So we'll be following up on that actively, and that pretty much covers Park Place.
Okay.
Thank you.
Steve, do you have any additions?
Well, we do have traffic calming on Holcomb right now. There are 2 steel plates on location. And it does slow the traffic down, although a lot of people just swerve around it into the oncoming 60-mile-an-hour lane, so.
That's funny. All right. Gaffney Lane, we have our next meeting next Thursday, which will be the 14th, and we've invited our planner, Diliana. We haven't seen her in a while, so she's going to come. And then we also have poor Dana is going to come back and give us some more updates on, they just received their 90% plans for the Malala Avenue streetscape. So that's always a enlightening event. So for CIC, I haven't been able to go because I just had knee surgery, so I've been out of it for the past few months, but I'm still sitting on the Development Stakeholders Group Committee as a representative of the CIC. We used to meet every second Thursday morning, but that's going to be changed, has just changed to be every other month. But I am still interested in sitting on that, even after I'm not chair, but if anyone else wants to take my place, they could, we can talk about that too, but just so you know, I would still be interested in staying on that. So
At 7:30 in the morning?
yeah, 7:30 in the morning. This Wednesday, the 6th, I will be going before the City Commission to give them our 3 ask for the 3 things that we voted on at our last meeting. And then on December 19th, I will be doing the annual CIC update. So if there's anything that you can think of that you would like me to mention at that time, let me know so I can put that in to the presentation. One of the things, I mean, we'll obviously be talking about the requests that we've made. Also, we'll be talking about the number, just look around, of low numbers, the number of inactive neighborhoods we have, and how the struggle that we have as a CIC to be able to help them, because we are limited, us being told we're an entity and the neighborhoods aren't, and trying to get clarification from the city commission on that, of giving us some direction and what can we do to help the neighborhoods, because I think citizen involvement is a big thing we have concern of. So that's what I've got.
Kenema, so we do have a meeting coming up on the 21st of November. And from the last meeting, we were introduced to the process of the natural resource overlay, and I think it impacts Kenema quite a bit. And I think going along the lines of concern, I think this would be a concern of our neighborhood and something that we'll probably bring to the floor more than once. And the big issue, as sort of like spelled out by John Lewis, is that there is a lot of identifiable things that don't seem to jive in terms of like alignments and right-of-ways and a number of things that would require maybe more discretion and a little less of imposition in terms of like correcting them. Things can be adjusted. I don't think we're going to move roadways, and we're not going to increase the length of the size of the right-of-ways. But I think when you put it on a screen and you show 70-plus violations, it's quite alarming. And many of the neighbors in our neighborhood don't even realize that some of those red dots will fall onto their property. And I think going forward, we need some allowances. We need some revisiting to see what can be done to deal with such issues, as opposed to subjecting certain individuals who have to pay that problem and deal with it in its sense of like a hardship or some kind of a violation. And so this issue, this concern will be going forward, and I'm sure you'll hear more about it from Kenema.
I saw that article with the write-up in the paper, and I was hoping you guys would mention it. That was alarming.
Just appalled.
Appalled.
Yeah, that's mine.
That's a good word.
Of this. Some of these issues, says we don't have alleyways or streets, and some of these are they're being called an issue because between your house and the road, it's city property. How are you getting there? Well, other people have cut in aprons, and we don't have that. So by crossing over and paving it, then that's a violation. And some of these homes are so old. They're almost over 100 years old. And Kenema wasn't even a part of Oregon City until 1928, and these homes were built way before that. So when Oregon City came in, they kind of took us with the warts and everything, but I guess they didn't. I don't know.
I like the one where a building had been built in an alley or something.
Yes, yes, yeah.
That's not an easy fix.
Not an easy fix, so I don't know. We'll be going to be talking about it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Denise?
Can I make a comment on that?
Yeah, Rachel.
So I would like to address some of the concerns. I can at least provide my perspective from sitting on the city commission. And I think the intent behind our effort to look into what's happening in Kenema, Tony and I talked about it this evening. It's definitely not meant to be punitive in any way, shape, or form. We were acknowledging that there's all of these issues, and you know, it was probably my idea in the very beginning to kind of say, is there a way that we can just acknowledge the existing what's happening on the ground in Kenema without it being punitive, so that we don't have 78 permits over time coming to the commission and having to come up, and every single one of them, however many a number it is, do we need to go through this process? Can we just acknowledge Kenema for the way that it's built right now? I can't, there's no intent by the commission to say we're going to build new roads or make people destroy walls and fences and porches and stuff like that. That's not the intent. It's really to more, can we fix this issue that exists between right-of-way, this conflict between right-of-way and property lines, while acknowledging the historic neighborhood and doing it right. I guess that's my thing. Is my whole intent was, I was like, I just want to fix it so that we don't have to. This doesn't have to come back to us 80 more times over the next 5 years. I mean, that was really the intent. Was can staff look into this and come back to us with some ideas? So we've started the conversation. There's going to be more conversations that happen on it. So, we definitely want to hear your concerns. I guess I would just say know that it's with the best intent of trying to do it right and address everybody, and just say we want to acknowledge how it is, and let's make sure we can work together so it doesn't have to become this repetitive process for everybody in the neighborhood. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Denise?
So we haven't had a meeting since we last met here. So our next meeting is this week, this Thursday. So I don't have anything new for the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association. But I did have an opportunity to plug the availability opportunities to volunteer for city board positions at Ogden. Sixth grade teacher contacted me and said, we're doing a civics unit and we were wondering if you could come in and talk to the kids about volunteering in the city. And so I went, well, I've enjoyed working with sixth graders before, but this is way beyond my expertise, but I know somebody who would be perfect for the job. So Denise and I went to the Ogden. It was awesome. I love sixth graders. They ask great questions. They're engaged. They ask some really good questions. So we were able to show them the map of the neighborhood associations, and we handed out some of the really nice brochures to the kids that were interested, and told them about the position that's on the Parks and Rec for students. So that was pretty exciting.
It would be sure fun if some parent came or the student came to one of our neighborhood meetings and said,
Right.
I found out about this at school.
Well, we encouraged them to come to the meetings. We gave them that brochure that has all the meeting dates and maps and stuff.
Which reminds me, we need to remind everybody to get to Kelsey your 2020 dates so she can update the website so that it's on our agendas. CIC dates need to be updated too, because I was noticing today, because one of them said, and one of the months accidentally left the 2018. So, of course, your eye is drawn straight to that. And I thought, why is 2018? Well, it's just in the middle of all the 2019 that accidentally
I will
had the
update
wrong
to
date.
2020.
So, great. All right, Denise, did you have any? Okay. Christina, anything
I don't
else?
have much other than I can give a Beaver Creek Road concept plan update. If you haven't already taken the survey, and I might send it one more time, there's a survey on our project page about just general opinions about roundabouts, signals, lane widths. We have 175, 180 people so far responded. So it's open till next Monday.
Do you have a way to track if it's a double dip?
We have a limit on ISP. I have a limit on 2 per ISP. Like, when your computer has an ISP, we only
I was thinking about that the other day. I don't
2
know
per
randomly
ISP.
why.
So you can't, someone can't go in there and do 10 responses. So each computer has its own address.
Right.
And so we know, it's like a one
I have 7 computers.
Well, then you have a lot of surveys to take. But anyway, we do limit that so people can't.
Did all of you see online that Tony was dressed a little differently this morning? Wasn't it this morning you went out to do the, Is that it's your turn for update. I don't know if you're gonna mention that or not, but I didn't know if we were gonna see the lumberjack Tony or he and Chief Band and Sergeant Davis Captain
Davis
looked like a lumberjack.
Wendy Lipke, Robert Lipke's widow. We go out every year and go out to the memorial on 26th there and do a cleanup and put a new wreath out. So it's an honor to be able to go do that with her and
I thought that was really
just
neat.
catch up with her, see how she's doing, how Ziva's doing. Ziva was down on Trick or Treat on Main Street the other day, growing like a weed. So it's a very, very special thing. So Thursday, November 7th, 6 to 7:30, we have our Economic Development Manager meet and greet here at City Hall, if you're interested. So we have a couple candidates coming in for that. On November 14th at 6 p.m., an enhancement grant workshop. So the enhancement grant committee had asked to meet before we start that enhancement grant process again to kind of talk about how the program's running, any changes that they'd like to make to it in terms of how grants are awarded, size of grants, number of grants, that type of thing. So just kind of looking at how we do that process before we get into doing that process. And then December 13th, 4 to 6:30, at the library community room, we'll be having a retirement open house for Maureen Cole, for our library director, as she is nearing her retirement date. So if you have a chance to come out and say goodbye to her, I'm sure she would appreciate that. And then starting this Thursday, we'll have an interim community services director. His name's Don Robertson, so he'll be in place in the community services department until we get that position advertised and rehired over the next couple of months. And then I'm on the spot a little bit. We are doing a I'm drawing a blank a little bit. Downtown parking study. User survey. So we have a survey available online. So if you have a chance to go to our website and take part of that survey, we'd greatly appreciate it. Just trying to look at, how our downtown is accessed, how it's utilized, how folks are getting in and out of that area via their bike, ped, vehicle.
Where you park.
I took that survey, but I don't remember how I got there. Do you know what outreach has been done as far as how you've put it out there?
I think Kristen's done it, but I can send a link to the CIC.
Okay. I'm just
I've seen
curious,
it on Facebook.
how's the word getting out? And I can't remember where I found it.
I shared it on the Oregon City Raw, but
That's probably where I saw it.
that's probably where you saw it. Yeah.
On Facebook, yeah.
So just a shout out to Data. Data's great. This is our year 0 of data for our user, survey for how people get to and from downtown. So ideas, we can start looking at trends over time and do things, how are projects that we're doing affecting these trends? And so the more information we have, the better data we have. So that's my data.
I remember at one time, Tony, you had mentioned you were going to be working with businesses in the area for after-hours parking. Has anything ever come about?
Not yet. We're getting pretty close, though. I believe we're bringing a presentation to the commission, I think, in December.
Because I noticed somebody posted on Facebook one night, I don't know if it was Trick or Treat night, they said, our lot is open tonight. And I thought, wow, that was wonderful, and that's what triggered that.
Yep. So we've identified 2 businesses, 2 to 3 parking lots, private lots, that are willing to participate in the program, and then we'll be opening up the City Hall lot as well. Utilize the elevator to get down for some additional off-street parking and try that pilot program out.
Now, Tony, also, what, the parking downtown, and you keep track of asking people how many times you just drive through the downtown area also, or are you just worrying about the parking situation down there?
It did ask questions about driving through.
Okay, because I drive through there a lot. I'm always parking, but that's the way I get through a lot of places I go, and that's a traffic pattern. That,
Yeah, it's kind of like
like a travel pattern
if
as well.
downtown's your destination, how are you getting there?
But one of the questions was,
Well, it's not my destination. It's what I go through to go where I'm going.
yeah, it was more along the lines of, one of the questions was, do you just drive through and don't try to park?
Yeah.
It was like one of them.
Okay.
Or one of the answers, could that been your choice or something? So it really didn't address a lot of that.
Yeah, because that is still a traffic pattern.
That's all that I have. Thanks.
Oh, thanks, Tony. Commissioner Smith? Lyle?
Oh, I gave my items. You can tell. I was like, when I mentioned that, I was like, I can take it back. So I don't think I have anything else to add.
All right, anything else have any for good of the order? All right, with that, we are adjourned until next month.